Thank you very much for coming. My name is Marc Muher. I'm giving this presentation. Current title is Using IR Skills to Learn About the Brain. I may have called it Hack Your Brain too. It's the best I could come up with. So thank you. Let's see, a little bit about me. Why am I qualified to come up here and say anything? I'm really not, but I do have a couple of qualifications. I have a master's in social work, a master's in cybersecurity. I have a lot of unearned confidence, and I have a CISSP. So, you know, that kind of explains the whole deal. Oh, sorry. Okay, no problem. Okay, and why am I giving this talk? Honestly, look, the world is kind of crappy right now. There's a lot of stuff going around. I mean, I'm speaking for myself, but I feel like we could all use a little bit of patience sometimes. Is this better? Okay. Also, I'm getting CUs for doing this, so it's just a never-ending battle. So, okay, so the basics. So the PICERL response framework. It's, you know, the basic framework we all learned about. You know, it's in every book. It's in everything. You know, it involves 6 stages. I've made this one a little realistic and turned prevention down to very tiny, because nobody knows. You know, that's all the stuff that we're supposed to do as, you know, as cybersecurity people that we don't. You know, it never really happens. So we're going to start with, you know, the other part of the PICERL system, which is the isolation, containment, eradication, recovery, and lessons learned. So, you know, basic steps. So in dealing with grief, in dealing with the human mind, we have other frameworks too. So one of the other frameworks you use for grief are the Kubler-Ross stages of grief. So 5 stages here, and frankly, if you thought that IT had bad acronyms, look at DABDA. So you know, you have denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. So the thing with stages of grief is, you know, it's nice. They look really nice here on the page, but you know, there's no rule that says it has to go in this order. You know, stuff gets out of whack all the time. It's normal, you know. So you don't have to start with denial if you can start with something else. And here's a little bit more just about grief in general, because we say grief, you know, and that's a big word, and you know, and like many things, you know, it's a word that needs a real definition. So we're talking about the causes of grief, the causes of loss. You know, we're talking death of someone important to you, and I just want to put here that means important to you, not important to other people, because you know that a loss is a loss. What else? You know, what other things can cause grief? Just illness, you know. I mean, this is, you know, kind of one of the classic presentations of this is, you know, when somebody gets, you know, a bad diagnosis, you know, and you go through those stages, you know, that's an illness. You know, money and career, obviously huge stressors, life changes like moving and graduation. Those can trigger a grief response. Love or lack thereof, always, you know, always a stressor, and of course holidays, always terrible stressor. But, you know, there's normal grief and when there's time to get help, and I do want to make sure that, you know, we clarify when people need to get help. You know, you don't want to, if you're injuring yourself or others, if you're really negatively affecting your life, not just changing things, but, you know, burning bridges. Also, if you're already prone to depression, you have other major stressors going on, because, you know, stuff doesn't only happen once at a time. And also if this goes on for a really long amount of time, like we're not talking a week, you know, of going through this, we're talking months, we're talking years, I mean, a really long amount of time. So those are things when you really need to get help, you really need to seek a professional, which I am not, by the way. So the stages. So my basic premise here is these stages do correspond to each other. So what we know about the PICERL system can help us remember what stages of the Kubler-Ross system we're in. You know, we start off isolation. You know, that's when you first get the alert. You know, you're verifying. You're getting scope. You know, excuse me. You know, this is where you get an alert and you're checking it out. You know, is it an actual virus, or is it, you know, somebody running a weird script? You know, in the grief stage, that kind of corresponds to denial. Denial is, you know, that first. What do you mean? That, you know, that first. No, that can't be happening. No, that's the wrong person. No, check again. You know, and you know, that's denial. It's shock. It's confusion. It's avoidance. Sometimes it's even, it does present as some relief, though, because the brain is weird. Next stage, containment. So containment, you know, that's where we, you know, okay, you verified the alert's correct. Okay, now we got to quarantine. Now we got to limit the spread. We have to find out exactly what we need. We're scoping out, you know, what our changes are, or what has happened, and that's what we're gonna, you know, and that's where we're gonna focus on. In the stages of grief, that corresponds to anger. So anger, that middle stage is grief. You know, we're all pretty familiar with that. You know, it comes out. You know, it's that frustration. It's, you know, it's irritation. It's anxiety. But what you know, it's the mind. It's taking that pain and attempting to put that pain elsewhere. It's directing it externally. That's anger. You know, and look, it's a pretty hard stage to get through sometimes. Next, we're down to eradication in our system. Eradication is where we removed, you know, we removed the virus, or removed whatever sort of, you know, incidents happening, and we're working on remediating. You know, we have a scope, we know what we're doing, and now we're just getting rid of it. So that kind of corresponds to depression in the Kubler-Ross stage, where, you know, where the depression, you know, where the eradication, you know, where you're doing something, but you're really just kind of trying to maintain the status quo. So the depression, it's the same thing. You're in that stage of helplessness. You're overwhelmed. You know, I mean, there's hostility here, and sometimes there's running. You know, because, you know, again, the brain's trying to avoid that pain. You know, it's trying to move on. So then finally, or not finally, next is the recovery stage of the PICERL system. You know, and that's where you're getting back to prod. You know, you're getting people working again. You know, computers working. You know, whatever, the business is ongoing. So, and that's just what you're trying to do, is get back there, and that corresponds to bargaining. There's a bargaining stage to the stages of grief, and you know, and again, you're making deals. You're making deals with yourself. You're making deals. You're trying to figure out a way around this. Your brain is trying to process this. You're trying to find alternatives. You're getting a second opinion. You're trying to find meaning in it all. You're trying to find what it does, what it means. Then finally, we have lessons learned. You know, the other part of the PICERL thing that most people just avoid because you get too busy. But lessons learned, that's where you're like, okay, this is what happened. How are we going to stop it from happening again? What do we learn? What improvements can we make? You know, do we need a new antivirus? Do we need to make sure, you know, that we're vulnerability scanning? Something like that. You're making improvements, and you're trying to avoid going through this again. And that's where you get to acceptance in the stages of grief. You know, it's where you know, you kind of make peace at some stage, at some point with the grief. You know, you're creating a plan for the future. You're creating realistic options. You know, you're moving forward. You know, but with full knowledge that you're dealing with that grief. So what does this all help us? I mean, I kind of talked about it, but we do have to, you know, we do have to deal with this, you know, both with ourselves and other people. So kind of, there's at different stages of the grief process, the person is more or less, is more receptive to certain talks. So as you go down the stages of denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, you're going to change what you can do. At first, you're only going to be able to listen. You're going to be able to be like, man, that's really tough. That's tough. Whatever you say to somebody who's going through grief, however you're dealing with it yourself too. So, and listening and info, and as the person kind of gets into that bargaining stage, gets into the depression stage where they've gained a little perspective, and that's where they really need the emotional support. That's where, and this goes for yourself too. I mean, you need to know yourself that's where you're going to need some emotional support. And then, once a person's in the acceptance stage, that's when you can start, with guidance, but it's more like, if you don't want, let's say somebody gets in a bad car accident, you don't want to show up at the hospital and be like, hey, let's go get you in a new car right now, while they're still hooked up to tubes. You don't have that guidance. You need to move that on into the longer stages, into the later stages of the grief process. So, okay. Now there's problems. So, the Kubler-Ross stages of grief, look, it's possibly all just made up. I mean, it is all made up. I mean, it was somebody invented it, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross in the late 60s, early 70s, I think, said, hey, based on their knowledge, their experience, they said, hey, here's what I've been seeing, and it resonated, so maybe it works, but look, psychological theories come and go all the time. That's just how it is. There's also anytime you're talking about psychological theories, you really have to acknowledge the gigantic cultural bias that goes into creating these theories. Okay, so think about it. Like how do you develop psychological theories? Okay, well you get therapists who deal with their patients and stuff. Also, you deal with a lot of college students. You deal with a lot of affluent people, or more affluent people who can afford therapy. You get college students also who are going to take, they'll be like, yeah, I'll take a couple hours worth of standardized tests for $10. I mean, that's just what you do in college, when they do labs and stuff. And so, but that does give you a pretty self-selecting population, So you do have to, decide, does this really work for everybody, or does this work for, people who were in college in the 70s and 80s when they were developing these things? So, also all psychological models are flawed because, everyone's different, and, everything's so granular that, no two people are the same, it can all just basically be made up, But generally, when you have one that resonates, there's at least some validity to it. So that's why I chose the Kubler-Ross here. Finally, any questions? So that's it for my presentation. Thank you all. Yeah, I'm happy to take any questions. Apparently, we don't have a microphone, so if you just shout it out, and I'll repeat it if there's any questions. Cool, awesome. Hey, everybody, thank you very much for coming and listening to me. I do appreciate this getting this idea that's been in my head, getting it out of here and into, well, everybody else's heads. But so thank you all.